Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to start the 1 o'clock session here in the Ingo Theatre, and it's going to be slightly different to perhaps what you might have been expecting, but this is a real-life example of event technology being put to the test and actually coming to reality. We've got a session coming up now on navigating the risks of AI, from robots to face recognition, and we have got two absolutely awesome people who are going to talk us through this. Now, first one I'm going to introduce to you is Nick Borelli, and if there is somebody who I know has energy when it comes to this topic, it is Nick Borelli. He has already run sessions online that have educated many, oh there they are, different event professionals in this particular topic area. And also we have Nick Fagan, who last night was awarded the Best Event Technologist of the Year award here at Event Tech Live, and it was awesome that he was able to be recognized for all of the successes that he has achieved so far. We've got these guys with us online today, and they are going to explain why, but I know that if there are two people that can make this work, it is definitely this pair of Nicks. I'm going to remind you guys, please use this QR code up here on this screen to send any questions in, and they will be able to receive all of the questions via me in exactly the same way as they would as if they were on the screen. So we're going to kick off now on the Ingo stage. Nick, I'm going to go over to Nick Borelli first. You can get us started.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, ETL, for facilitating this, allowing me to stream in. I was just saying I did 13 presentations in 4 different time zones in the last 5 weeks, and this is one of those moments where technology allows me to, have a great marriage still. So it turns out technology has some real emotional, real ROI value in our lives if used correctly. The part that I'm really excited about with this is that I get to spend some time with Nick here and congratulate him on that win yesterday. I mean, that should be immediately what you do on LinkedIn, is change your title to that.
Do you know what? It's absolutely amazing, Nick. I was so humbled yesterday to receive that award. There's some great guys in the category. It's amazing, actually, to get recognition individually. There's so much, that we do as a team, and I'm part of a team that enable me. But it was amazing to receive that award last night at such a prestigious event, surrounded by peers in the same industry. So yeah, thank you very much for mentioning it. And likewise, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Sorry I can't be there in face. Thanks to you guys in the audience that will listen to us now. Great example of low latency connectivity happening now. Just chuffed to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to get right into it. Just to give people some context, is that I both work for an AI company called Zenus, and then I'm also the facilitator at PCMA's Event Leadership Institute, where I run the course on AI for events. So I do presentations and I do coursework with hundreds of event planners all the time, talking about AI. It's all I talk about all day long. So I usually get to talk about all the really cool, awesome new things. Like you see, you can do this with ChatGPT today and make this and make that, which is all good. But I wanted to set the table and talk about some of the things that I think you should know before you jump all in, because I think you should jump all in. But we're gonna go over some things that I think will make you more prepared and keep you honest, so you can go in with your eyes open. So first question I have is so AI, how talking about how it's different really than other technologies. What are the risks associated with AI that are different from other technologies, Nick?
I mean, that's a really great question to open with. And actually, it's often not as complex as people think with regards to AI and the additional risks. Look, all technologies have certain risks associated with them. And actually, some of those risks are unique to an individual technical solution. And AI is no different. One of the simplest things that actually gets often overlooked with AI is, there's two core components, right? There's the data and the algorithms. And if one of those is wrong, you can get some pretty alarming results, okay? Your data can be biased and so on. It can be incorrect. It can be offensive, And actually, the first thing to look at and to remember with AI is that it is only as powerful as the data and the information it's given. It's pretty obvious with generative AI, if you give something the wrong brief, it draws the wrong picture, but it can be less obvious with something that affects meaningful, face-to-face interactions. If you're using something to analyze an individual or an experience and then change content in real time, If this is wrong, it can be catastrophic. And it's often actually overlooked that there's irrelevant data, bad data, etc., within the build of a solution that uses artificial intelligence. Would you agree, Nick?
Yeah, completely. I mean, it's as someone who has spent 2 decades writing surveys and polls, I could tell you that the very specific choices that you make in the questions absolutely skew the outcome. You know, any good political pollster can make anything sound like it's true, right? So in the same way that
Correct.
you're doing that, having an understanding at the input stage as far as the data or the ideas that you put in makes a huge difference. And it has the ability, and this is the scariest part, full stop, I think, with AI is that it's a multiplier. It scales up good, it scales up bad, you know, and it doesn't make really a call between the two. That's kind of up to you and your due diligence. So uh, if the idea is that like Nick said, there's bad data, it's going to take that bad data and it's going to extrapolate exponentially, potentially, the opportunity for that bad data to be spread. So, you know, consider that. We'll get into more specific examples later, likely with some of these questions as far as what that means. But be on the lookout. And for all of us, like, what does that mean practically for you? In my opinion, that means that you have to be really diligent in your domain authority, and you have to kind of know your audience, know what you want to put into things, and also check it, you know, afterwards. I mean, I think it's very seductive to, specifically when it comes to generative AI, to cut and paste. I would advise you against that. You have to be a gatekeeper.
Absolutely agree, Nick. Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I think, it's not easy to determine what data is relevant as well. Sometimes data that can appear completely irrelevant actually has a massive positive impact on an outcome. And likewise, data that you're sure is really relevant and correct can skew results to be biased and so on. So, yeah, absolutely. Data is king. The algorithm's king. And of course, it goes without saying that the misuse of AI is really damaging for brand. Brand awareness. Not as an organizer, but also for our customers. If it could result in quite an alarming negative interaction used in the incorrect way.
Yeah, I agree. So I just try to think about it like the idea that always remember, it's the assistant. It's not in charge. You're in
Mm-hmm.
charge. You know what's right. Your empathy and your understanding of your audience is the difference between something that is, you know, damaging or, you know, valuable. So that's great. So I go around and I present on AI constantly, and I try to tease the audience as saying, I bet most of you are here because you want to find out if AI is going to take your job or not. And I don't answer that question for a while because I love that tension. It's so much fun. So I let them kind of stew in that for a while as I, you know, set the stage. I think we might, you know, get to the answer of that quicker with this one than normal, simply because you're all really smart people. So Nick, what do you think? Is it going to take my job? You know, it comes to the organizers in the audience right now. Is it coming for them?
So I think realistically, with regards to AI taking jobs, currently I'm not seeing much evidence of that actually happening. However, there's a statement that I can't claim to be mine, but I agree with completely, is that currently and in the near future, AI is unlikely to take your job. But however, somebody using AI might take your job. They might be better at it. I think certainly with vacancies and jobs, AI, it has a positive impact. It's creating roles. It's fantastic that it's doing that we need more professionals in this amazing industry. But interestingly, there's another take on that as well. And we see it, in somewhat in our industry already, whereby you might have a team of 10 people doing something that AI can enhance the abilities to do. They can be quicker, they can be better, they can be more accurate. And so I think what we may see is whereby an agency or any company might want to recruit more. So let's say you want to up that team. Actually, you can ask the question, however, if I use AI to increase the efficiency, there might be less people I need to recruit. So I can see in the not too distant future AI making it so that there are somewhat a shift in vacancies available. But is it going to take people's jobs immediately right now? No. In the near future, I think it might affect positively the amount of work that an individual can do, and actually I see in the near future it is already. So that might affect actually when somebody's looking financially. Am I going to recruit more people, or am I going to invest in infrastructure that's AI derived to enhance the team? Well, actually I think there's a case for both sides, but we're going to see more of I'm going to invest in some AI infrastructure so that my team can achieve more.
Yeah, to catch up, especially, right? I think there's a lot of organizations that are looking right now to upskill as many of their team members as possible. And I was in this position in the 90s where I was in the early 2000s. I was valuable simply because I was the only person that knew how to do web stuff, So,
Yeah, yeah,
and then eventually we all sort of knew how to do that. Like I was a valued asset because I could use Microsoft Word, and there was a
yeah.
short period of time where that skill set was a delineator. And I think that those right now, if you want to get ahead quickly, and maybe I'm talking specifically to young professionals, if you want an edge and you don't have the experience somebody else has, consider AI adoption, going hardcore into that, because for a year or two, that alone will be able to put you into rooms that you normally wouldn't be able to get into. So I think that's interesting.
Uh,
Yeah,
a,
so yeah, go on.
a valid point on this, Nick, is that also, the misconception is that AI is completely new.
Oh yeah,
That
it's
this is
been around.
AI has been around a long time, right? And AI actually, as we know it, somewhat has been around a long time. It's trending at the moment because it is relevant. It is correct and it is having a profound effect. But in reality, things like chatbots and actual artificial intelligence where a machine is pretending to be a person, that is amazing. They're amazing experiments and whatnot, but they've been around for a little while, so we're not quickly going to see a change in vacancies, and it's not quickly going to take your work off individuals in terms of actually having a job.
Yeah, I agree. I think what we're seeing right now is not so much the onset of AI as this new idea, but it's just another level of maturity that has piqued people's interest, because for a lot of use cases, it's kind of ready for prime time now. So I think that's the sort of like level we're at right now. And for me, when I think of specifically generative AI, I think around the idea and your effect on your job and keeping it and that kind of thing. Here's what I think happened with the maturity of generative AI. I think that your ability to create B plus work has been fairly democratized. Um, and people without your context, without your experience, can let's say create B plus work pretty instantaneously. So what does that mean? It means that the bar has raised. It means, and normally that's a macro good thing, and it is. But in the terms of people who aren't using AI, what the challenge is that most of us in the events industry are under the weight of so much tedious work and so much check boxes and so much list making and things like that, which it isn't our lack of energy, passion, intelligence, or anything that keeps us away and has kept us away over the years from A plus work. It's just the drudgery of the tasks. So someone without our skills pushes a bunch of buttons, to be short, and gets a B plus work, and anybody can do that. And we're not using that, and we're trudging along, and we get to B plus work. So you worked really hard to get to that level, and they just started at that level. Now here's the good news. That's the bad news. I mean, that is bad news for people. The good news is if you start at B plus, those people can't really go beyond B plus, because they don't have the context you do, the experience you do, the passion that you do. You can. So if you start at that level, if you utilize AI to start doing some of the task related work that has kept you from that, you're reaching those high heights, then you have the ability to create events that no one's ever created before, and do something that's really bigger goals and challenges that have never been overcome. My future proofing to get you to A plus, and this is a working theory, I think I've got it down to 3 that I think might be it. It's empathy, probably the most important. AI doesn't have any of that stuff, and that's why it's important when you're looking at some of the problems with AI to use that as a lens. Creativity, big jumps. What if we could? I've never combined these two things together. What could we get out of it? That kind of thinking. Is going to be extremely important. It always has been, but more so now. And then that context of knowing where you're at. So ultimately, I think if we think about what we do differently, less about the things that we know and more about the ways that we do things, I think your jobs are fine. So fingers crossed, but like that's I don't know if that jives with your thinking as well, Nick.
Completely in agreement. Yeah, yeah. It's a tool to be used, not a risk at the moment with regards to your job. Absolutely.
Agreed. So I mean, you and I get to talk about facial recognition technologies a lot. It's fascinating.
Hmm.
There's risks, there's rewards, there's case studies out there of organizations that have used this to great benefit, other ones
Hmm.
to less. And I guess the question is, what are those risks and rewards about adoption of this technology?
So I think the first thing to do when we think about AI and facial recognition is just to take a moment to review where we're actually at with the technology. As we've previously alluded to, AI isn't necessarily a new technology. Some of it is, of course, but certainly facial recognition and measuring an object that happens to be an individual and then being able to piece those measurements together to identify somebody has been around a little while, right? And we saw it come out before really GDPR regulation was largely in place, and I believe it's largely, accountable and responsible for that wonderful piece of legislation, in certain ways. What has changed right now, though, and especially with AI, is that we've got more than a decade of relevant, good facial recognition data that can be used, that can be completely anonymous. And we now have the ability to process that information in the cloud and actually truly understand an individual. The first thing to think about facial recognition is that its best use is not just to recognize an individual. The technology has come a long way in terms of accuracy. That's great. Cameras are better. Algorithms are better at predicting measurements. But actually, the most exciting thing you can do with facial recognition is actually analyze an individual or analyze an object, I should say. And this is has some pretty profound positive ramifications for our industry and communication. The risk is that you are absolutely processing somebody's biometric data. You're measuring somebody's individual features, and if you're using that to recognize an individual, of course there are some pretty serious stipulations, correctly so, with regards to managing that data. As long as you manage that data safely, actually, if you don't identify an individual, the data is still actually very, very relevant. If I can tell how engaged somebody is, I don't need to know who they are to understand whether I should talk to them more or not. If I can analyze an individual using that solution to say, yes, you're interested in what I'm saying, and that's not because you're smiling, that's because you have showed me and we've put a baseline on you as an object, and we understand that you are very likely to be engaged currently, as opposed to you're smiling, you're engaged. Using AI to cross-reference large amounts of data in the cloud, then I can go, yeah, I want to talk to you more. I don't need to know that you're Nick, you're Nick Borelli. It is constantly one of the most controversial topics to talk about around facial recognition, and there are certain places, and I'm sure you know better than me, Nick, but certainly in North America, there are certain states where it's just like, wow, don't talk about biometric data, and there are other places that are early adopters, and it's the same in Europe. We see different levels of challenge. In Germany is a market that I work in a lot, as the rest of Europe, but Germany is particularly cautious correctly so, when it comes to processing data. So there can, certain countries can be, and certain demographics can be, early or late adopters, and that's fine. But in reality, it goes without saying, facial recognition is processing biometric data. But we both know of a solution, and actually ways that data doesn't need to be unique to an individual. It doesn't even need to be recognized as a person, just an object. And actually, the outcome from all that data is that you can really understand an audience, really understand, a demographic, without having to know that is an individual, and that is that person, and still do some, amazing things with it. It's not CCTV. It's not surveilling an audience to know, everything that you should and shouldn't know. Like all AI, with the right set of parameters around it, it's safe and ethical.
Yeah. I just found this out. The venue in New York City, Madison Square Gardens, uses
Mm-hmm.
facial recognition to weed out, specific people on their ban list, which includes
Wow.
any lawyer who is in a current suit with that with that venue. Which,
Wow.
I mean, usually facial recognition to weed out lawyers is either like one of the the most ethical things, or
That's
least. I don't
asking
know. It
for it,
depends on.
right?
Yeah, yeah, that's a real.
It, it-
That,
you know,
that's yeah, they're going to
But
bat.
your target demographic is literally the people that can sue you. That's an interesting approach to take. But no, and I think, that for me is not necessarily one of the uses of facial recognition in terms of the events industry, as I'm sure we'd all agree in the
Yeah,
room,
for sure.
that we're currently looking to adopt. But yeah, that's the thing with facial recognition. It's got a bunch of bad press, correctly so, because it's been used in a bunch of bad ways. But that doesn't
And
mean it can't do great, wonderful, good things.
I completely agree, and I think that there's I mean, so I work for a company, Zenus, which does it takes another bend, which was you were alluding to on facial recognition, which is facial analysis, and it says that, and this is what attracted me honestly to working with the company, is the idea of, and it's so rare, technology with a level of restraint, because like I'm a marketer, so like there was a point in time on Facebook before they went to in front of a bunch of congresses, uh, where you could target very specific traits in individuals, like too much, right? But as a marketer, there's no too much. I want everything. And if I'm an event marketer, I want to know when a specific VIP comes into my booth, or I mean, I'd love to know all that stuff,
Mhm.
because that's how I make money. That's how I save money. And then in between the people, whose data is floating around at our events, and the marketers who are starving for as much as they can get,
Mhm.
is you, the organizer. And what's your job? And I look at it much like I think
Absolutely.
of duty of care. Like I think duty of
Mhm.
care pretty understandable when it comes to, let's say, cooking the chicken all the way, or
Mhm.
having rigging done by a professional, right? Like we get that, right? Like we get the
Mhm.
implications. But I really think that when it comes to biometric data, I think about that as the person too.
Of
And
course.
I think
There's an
it's very,
individual at the end,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Yeah, exactly that.
Sorry.
So like I think that your stewardship is that, right? Like the people that you work
Correct.
with, and your clients, like that's, and you're helping them figure out where the line is. So like what we do is we say our technology kind of stops at a certain point. We don't collect the biometric data, we don't collect the individual data. I'm sure you'd like to know when a CEO comes into your booth. We're not going to tell you that, but because of that, we can give you lots of actionable data, like how many people, how many impressions you got, what the dwell rates are, a sentiment of the reactions of experiences that you design, like lots of incredibly actionable data for events. But there's a line that says, this is as far as we're going to go, because we don't want to trade on the individual in order to satisfy the marketer. But we can get you so close that everyone wins. And I think that people like you, Nick, like that's what you do with technology, is you try to create these holistic
Correct. Yeah.
win-win-win situations. It takes a lot of
Absolutely. And I
creativity.
think it does, yeah, absolutely, on all corners actually. But the thing to also be aware of, that facial recognition to recognize somebody, like I say, can do great things. The amount of
Yeah.
conversations I've had with an individual where they say they're not happy to be identified, right? And I completely get it. They're worried about their biometric data, but they're wearing a name badge with their name, their job title, and a QR code that links to all their registration data, right? So they're not happy to share the data that they're literally wearing around their neck. There are so many like amazing conversations with regards to facial recognition based off the bad press. When we talk about analysis, like Zenus do better than anybody I've ever seen before. It's an incredible solution. As you know, we use it at DRPG all the time, and our customers love it. But actually, when you think about analysis, there's a wonderful conversation. And I bet if I ask the room now, how many of you are using an Android or an iOS-based device, you pretty much all hold your hand up. And if you're not, actually, the other operating systems deploy similar solutions, whereby it's very, very likely that I could put, almost guarantee that you've opted in to have, analysis done with the personal device that you're using. An example is, and we've seen the headlines for years where it says, somebody's holding a phone in front of an infrared camera and they see the flash every 5 seconds, right? Those headlines are around for years. They've been reported by the BBC News, many other news outlets around the world. And in reality, what's actually happened in there probably is somewhat as bad as people think, but in other ways not, right? Okay, so Android iOS device is going to check whether you're engaged looking at the screen, and it's going to say it's doing it because it affects screen brightness, it affects notifications, sounds, and whatnot. But make no mistake, of course, the device knows what content you're looking at and when you're looking at it and how engaged you are. So solutions like Zenus, what Zenus does, and which is amazing, is that it does this ethically. We're going to tell everybody we're doing it. We're only going to take it so far, but it's going to enable us within the events industry, like these solutions, to use that data meaningfully. All we're doing is actually giving power to the events industry to utilize data that is already out there. It's just not available to our industry always to make it better for the individual that the camera is pointing at. Because that's the end goal here. It's not to always make it better for the organizer or the the operator of an experiential event. It's to actually make it better for the individual to make sure the data is correct and right and at the right time with the right message for that person to get the most from it.
Yeah. Yeah. As someone in technology, in the events world, like I think of everything as win, 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 like
Mm-hmm.
that's the sort of pass fail. So, I mean, to maybe springboard off of that and the idea of privacy, both you and I are passionate about innovation and adopting innovation.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody has to be in the events world because the events world's natural inclination is to not fail, right? And
Mm-hmm.
there's
Correct.
this kind of push pull, right? Because events, and here's my theory on this, is that I think that everyone in the event organizer role has more to lose from
Yeah.
failing than they do gains from succeeding, in big ways, right? So not failing,
100%
much
agree.
more of a worry point. Yeah. So innovation and privacy, where's the line between those two things? Like, how are they related to you?
So innovation doesn't change privacy, right? I guess is the first thing to say. Whether something
Yeah,
should be private
exactly.
or not doesn't change because we're trying to innovate. Absolutely agree. And I think, if you're going to use somebody's data that is, like I say, related to that individual, it's got to be relevant, right? You've got to have a why. As GDPR stipulates, don't keep any data that you don't need to keep, right? It's pretty simple. One of many complex rules, but it's a pretty simple, rule to adopt. And so because we're innovating and we're using artificial intelligence with, in our toolkit, doesn't actually change anything for privacy. If you're going to process data, be it biometric or actually, you're going to face somebody's skill. That's a really interesting one, Nick, as I know, you'll be keen to talk about. Like, so an example is obviously, what's going on in the world of Hollywood at the moment with generative AI. You're gonna, that is an example that we didn't talk about earlier, actually, with regards to it taking people's jobs. Now,
Yeah.
my humble opinion on that is quite simple. That because you've got a fake person doesn't mean that person, it's based on a real person. So that real person should be rewarded. Actually, that's as simple as, realistically to control this. And I assume this is largely why the process of stop is that actually as long as the reward isn't massively changed, actually, and actually what they're saying isn't damage to that individual, why is there a problem that them not having to actually go and do that thing in reality? Okay, that's a whole other topic. But what I'm really interested around with ethics and certainly generative AI is actually when you get an individual that is not any one real person, and actually, how does that affect actors and producers and whatnot, where they need less actors, and whatnot. That's a really interesting point. I mean, it's a long conversation, right? With regards to the ethics and generating content that's based on AI algorithms. Would you agree, Nick?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we're going to be having some really interesting philosophical questions pretty soon because when people ask me, is this that, and it really ends up becoming down to like what your ethical guidelines are, for how you think about things. Like we've had, I look at it like my example I keep giving is there was a point in time where if you wanted a portrait as an individual, and by say a point in time, I mean for thousands of years, the portrait was the domain exclusively of the painter. That's how you got some creative output that resulted in a capturing of who you are. And then we created a mechanized capturing technology for reality, which was the camera. Now, after the camera was invented, we didn't stop painting. What did we do? Well, there was actually new art that came from that. Like we got into surrealism and there was a
Mm-hmm.
Dada movement and there was all kinds of stuff that I'd love to talk to art nerds about. But suffice to say, it's kind of very much a reaction. And right now, I think we're at the eye of the storm. I think we're in, either a Napster moment or maybe I like to use this phrase, grabbing a chair and throwing it through the glass window and grabbing whatever you can moment. It's not sustainable. I think, creating songs from dead artists and making them sing things that they, wouldn't have isn't the kind of thing that we're going to sustainably want to do. We don't want to sustainably make it so people are less likely to share their creativity, especially in a world where you have to do more tedious work. We're going to want to foster creativity more. So on the terms of ethics and generative AI, I think right now what you're seeing is lots of testing of where that line is. And I think when it comes to our work, what we do, it's very much incumbent on you to protect and understand your world. Like you have to understand and have dialogue, have transparent
Mhm.
dialogue with your constituents. Create. Maybe you want to create a focus group. Maybe you want to create an advocacy group and ask them, made up
Yeah.
of people with different, and ask them those questions. Like Nick, probably a big boon in your design is to be able to understand your audience and their
Correct.
feelings about these things might be vastly. I'm sure. I mean, you've worked with banks and you've worked
Yep.
with
Yeah. Yeah.
creatives and technology. The line's different, right? Like it's not the
It,
same.
Yeah, the line differs depending on the solution always. Even for the same customer, the line moves depending on the relevancy of the solution. Absolutely. And I think it's you can be ethical and you can process people's data correctly and still use AI. But there is that point that actually something can go wrong quickly, right? So if you're not on it, it can take longer to understand, where there's a problem or where data is shared or actually why that data is biased and whatnot. But yeah, absolutely agree with what you say, Nick. The line is different for the same customer with different solutions, and we always have to ask, why. It's a really simple statement, but we always have to ask, why do we need that information? And if that is easy to answer, then cool. You should be able to use the information if it's for the betterment of the individual, etc. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, don't skip that step, I guess, everybody. I think it's, don't take things for granted and don't feel weird about that. You maybe start the meeting
mhm.
off and saying, I'm going to ask why a lot. And I'm not
It's
I'm not trying to be a 9-year-old in the room. I'm not trying to be cute. Like I'm giving a moment, a pause, a time period, because I've done like a lot of facilitation, and that's a big deal to set that up ahead of time to say, I know most people don't ask why for every step of the way, and I get that, but we're at a time period, we're using new technologies, we're gonna ask why, and we're just want to give some thought and some intention before we do that, because you're right, not all technologies are needed for all problems. And sometimes it's overkill, and sometimes it's not the right fix for everything. You're absolutely right. The why question is, it can't be understated.
Absolutely agree. It's true of any technical solution. I'm sure of the multitude of individuals that are at Event Tech Live, they've all asked why. Why is their solution relevant? Why do customers want it? But it's often not said. We see
Yeah,
pretty bold statements at the moment in social media from marketing agencies, etc., that will say things like, "We do not use AI to generate our content." Now I want to ask them why.
why
Why don't
not?
you do it?
Yeah,
Because if you're telling your customers you are, and it's better for your customer and it's better for you, what's the issue? If you can sense check it as a human being, and like scrutinize it like you
that's
would
it.
any other piece of content, why is it an issue? So yeah,
I
yeah,
agree.
and actually
Yeah,
sometimes it's an issue because people are afraid, you know,
that's it. I think it's
which is
that.
an unfortunate
It's
thing.
like, we don't use interns, we don't use spell check, we don't use computers. It's like, all right, unless you're creating events for the Amish, for the most part, why? They're just tools. As long as
Yeah.
you're there, as long as you're the guardian, you're the gatekeeper, so what you use, it's ultimately still you, signing off.
You said earlier, Nick, around how AI can achieve quite quickly a B plus result and so on, and that for a while it's been asked of us, I hope, to be your A plus plus students, right, with regards to technical solutions. What's really exciting is where AIs enable us to achieve above A plus plus, right, to achieve the seemingly unimpossible. I know it's super cheesy, but it's absolutely true, and we're doing it in some ways now. Actually, you see hardware solutions that use AI in their development to make things that people don't believe when you tell them it can do it until they see it do it. It happens all the time at the moment.
It's
It's
like
never
magic.
happened so much. The biggest risk with individuals like this is where they are A plus plus right now, right? And there's a fear with AI, and they stay A plus plus while the rest of the world moves around them, right? Quickly people can get to B plus, but more excitingly than that for me is that those A star students are achieving something that was previously impossible. And if you are afraid, and fear is sometimes a good thing, I get it, but if you just approach everything with caution all of the time, because asking why isn't always about being cautious, it's making sure you get the most out of something. Then if you're not asking why and you're too cautious, then you know what, you're going to miss this movement, and it's barely getting started.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a nice healthy amount of having a why person in the room and having a why not person in the room, and having those things test each other and seeing what's possible. And I think that there used to be lots. I mean, limits were what kept us from the A plus plus. I think we need to see is that a limit? Just because it's never been done. Can we do it? And I think with the horsepower and the data and the intelligence that we have, I think we should start shooting for things that never been done. I want to start, and that was really positive. I want to bring another negative thing into it just because I'm trying to balance this out too. When people say AI biases, like what does that mean? And like what should organizers be on the lookout for when it comes to the word bias as it's applied to artificial intelligence?
I think, again, another point you made earlier that was really relevant to this is that AI can hang on certain points that we find maybe not that relevant, and really use those as a an absolute one or a zero, with regards to AI. So what do I mean? Okay, well, actually, in reality, often human beings are far more biased. We have an unconscious bias in most things that we do, unfortunately, and as much as we're aware of it, and things are better now than they ever have been for unconscious biases and questioning, am I being biased? The truth is that it can be unconscious still, right? You don't know that you're doing it. So if you're not cautious when you design a solution with artificial intelligence in mind, when you're creating a rule set and you're deciding what data to analyze, you could, without knowing, build in some of your bias into that solution. And actually this happens, right? Specifically when you use AI for something like reviewing applications, like CVs that are submitted. This is the sort of thing where AI can be really risky, right? And actually you can have a bias built into an algorithm without realizing. And this is where earlier when we talked about those risks, that it can take longer to identify an issue. Bias is something that can take a long time to understand, because you have to inherently look back to understand if there's a bias. So it's something to be really aware of, and if you're not fully aware of it when developing a solution, it's almost certainly going to bite you. So absolutely, with regards to bias, that is one of the biggest risks with developing technical solutions.
Yeah, I mean the
Can you
HR
hear
solution
me?
thing is
Can we
Yes, we
get
can
them
hear
to
you.
hear me?
one of the
Yes,
scariest
fantastic.
things.
Nick, sorry,
Yeah,
Nick. Nick B, I'm going
yeah,
to
no worries.
interrupt you briefly
Yeah,
because we do have a few questions, chaps.
Cool.
And we have now 7 minutes in which we could answer them. So I apologise for interrupting your
Right.
flow, but
No problem.
no,
seeing as
all
we've
good.
had these questions come in, I think it'd be fantastic to try and get through them. So I'm going to start with this first question, which is, what do you see as the top 3 use cases for AI in the events industry, specifically large trade shows? So top 3 use cases for AI in the events industry, specifically large trade shows. And I'm going to ask Nick B to start us off with
Oh,
that
I was
one,
gonna say.
please.
I was gonna say I was gonna default to the award winner, but I mean I have to say first is data, and not just because the data pays my mortgage, but it's the reality that I think what we've been missing the most in the events industry. There's two different things, and I think AI solves both of these groups. When it comes to data, we know events move the dial. We know that everything we do. Is valuable. We know that we create change. Prove it, and prove it in a spreadsheet, not just prove it like in a binary. This was a good show. This was a good presentation, but this was good 85%, and I now know what to do to get to a 90%, a 95%. So data tells the story of the impact of our event in a deeper way, and with that we get more. Hopefully, what we should be able to leverage it with is to get more resources. And then that's the problem. The other problem that we have on the other side is that we don't have enough time or resources. If everyone, I assume, is saying amen right now and agrees with me, Generative AI, on the other side of that, gives us the ability to have more potential resources and and use it for the team members that we wish we had. The hats that we're wearing, maybe some of those hats come off and become a generative AI. So like I won't do 3, I'll do 2, and then Nick
Sounds good.
can do 2, and then we'll give you a bonus.
Yeah,
Let's
sure.
bring Nick F
For,
in.
for me, quite quickly, the things that really enhance our solutions for our customers right now with regards to AI are quite simply knowing your audience, right? Well, what is an 8 out of 10 on a feedback form? Well, actually, we can use AI to understand your audience, and we can do that in real time. So immediately off the back of that are real-time relevant generation of content. That can be, I'm giving a PowerPoint deck to you guys in the room now, and maybe we're analyzing your reaction, and maybe I could use that data to decide what slide comes next. Meaning that, there's a really simple example of how making sure a presentation that I'm giving to an audience in the room is relevant without me having to try and judge, 100 faces at once, etc. So knowing your audience, real-time generation of content, and actually looking at a broader spectrum of data. We look at data post event all the time, from feedback from customers. Well, we can capture that data during the event, and make it relevant so that actually before the event you've used the data from a previous event to analyze and grow. And we see customers now leaving sessions blank actually on second and third days of large scale exhibitions, or given a gap in content and using AI already to analyze an audience and determine who's saying what, what do we want to know more about.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. Next question for you. There was mention of reward for usage of person's picture/profile. So there was a mention of reward for usage of person's picture/profile. However, in the film industry, it is an actor's career. Having their face scanned or voice, which is later AI generated, can prevent their future work. How else can we address this? Let's start with Nick Fagan, please. I'll repeat the question, actually, because that was quite a long one. Sorry,
Yep.
it was a long one.
Yeah,
so
no
there was
problem.
mention...
I've got them on screen as well, which is helpful.
Oh, you have? Fine. Well, I shan't repeat
Yes.
it then.
Yeah,
I'll let
yeah.
you continue.
So, we're using all the technology here, guys. All right.
We really are.
Sorry. Yeah. No. I absolutely agree with that is an issue, right? And it can prevent future work. I think there are rules and regulations that need to be in place that say if you use a fake Nick Fagan, it's still me, and actually there needs to be a reward for using me. That's the you can't just necessarily, and this is only my humble opinion here, but I think certainly in regards to Hollywood and replacing an actor with somebody that's not there, if you're still using the image and the voice, or even not using the voice of that individual, there should be reward, right? There should be financial reward, contractual agreements that mean that there isn't just a we've got this for free now, see ya. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's that simple, that we need governance and regulation that make it impossible to completely replace an individual without any reward. Does that answer
Yeah,
the question?
I agree. And I think I'm not going to say anything that disagrees with that. I mean, that's the number one thing that we need. I think to get there, we have to understand that similar to what Napster was, we also need technologies that can help identify this and make it easier for individuals to profit off of their own visage in different media. I mean, even in audio format, or like Midjourney, I could ask it to paint or give me an image as if it was painted in the style of a specific artist, and that artist has had their work scraped. And then also has been cut out of the process of someone utilizing their creative outputs, entirely. So like they've trained something to make them irrelevant. It's not good long term. So I think moving forward, the governance is probably the key thing. I think there's also some technology that's required in order to determine when people are using it and how they're using it. In the same way that I don't use Napster anymore, I use streaming services, and I'm happy to pay that monthly because it's convenient and easy, and it makes it so I wouldn't even consider using a Napster if that exists. And those people still get some sort of payment from it. So I think that those two things have to work together.
Thank you, both of you. So really, actually, at the moment, we're really relying on people's good nature. to not take advantage of this. And I like to think event professionals would fall into the good nature category. I like to think.
I'd just say on that comment, you're absolutely right, but that's not any different from other technologies as well.
Fair
You know,
comment.
not you. That's the case, right?
I guess the temptation is perhaps greater with AI at this particular moment in time. Last question. I realise we are going to run over a tad, but for the person who asked this, they may like to hear the answer. Nick Fagan, this is for you. You will have read it. But please could Nick Fagan explain more about his role? Because the Chief Technologist job title, I understand this, it's not the most common in the events space, so head of event technology. I have actually interviewed someone on exactly this topic at this event last year who was head of event technology for
Great.
Bloomberg. Like, what do you do? What is your role? What is your job? What does the future look like for you? Could you give us the nutshell of what your role, you know, I think at a headline we understand what it is, but what does it involve and how do you really fundamentally make a difference in the business?
I think that's a really interesting question, and you know, a creative technologist is no one thing. Specifically, you know, I am a creative technologist. I'm the creative technologist for DRPG. There's one of me at DRPG, but actually, people, embody what a creative technologist is in multiple disciplines. I sit across all our solutions in DRPG with regards to technology. So, you know, there are similar roles, somewhat like a head of creative with a technology, you know, bias in terms of, you know, the disciplines I look at. For me personally, because it is a unique thing being a creative technologist, my background's in theatre, rock and roll, and corporate, and multiple disciplines. So that enables me to look at a digital solution. It enables me to look at an audio solution, a lighting solution, and so on, and go, do you know what? Actually, have we unlocked the most potential for our customers with this technical solution? What aren't we doing as an industry and a business that we could be doing to make things better for our customers and obviously better for ourselves as well? My role at DRPG is to research, enhance, and to develop our technical solutions. That's why me and Nick know each other. You know, the reason I'm here with Nick today is because Zenus is one of those solutions that I identified we should be using. And in truth, it goes without saying, we looked at actually, do you know what, should we develop a solution ourselves to do this? Who's doing it? What are they doing? I looked at Zenus and went, actually, you know, with some thorough testing and inspection, that solution is the best on the market. It's very competitive and it does everything in line with what I want it to do. So that's one of those technologies. There's so many to talk about. Holoplot, many other solutions at the moment that are changing the world. I'm very, very fortunate in that where I work, as other places, encourage challenge in a positive way and give you the room to research and develop. Hopefully that gives you an idea. I know it's a bit wishy-washy, but it's hard to be specific because it's such a broad topic, really.
I think you've done an excellent job in a really, really short time frame there, so thank you. And we will draw this Ingo stage to a close now, and I'd love to just draw on that point there. The winner of the Event Technologist of the Year, who also just happens to have a background in rock and roll. Why not? Love it. Gentlemen, thank you so much for the contributions today. Really appreciate it. And we'll be restarting here on the Ingo stage at 1 o'clock. 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock. I lost an hour then. Thank you.